Thank you. Yes, so I think it was said before, I really enjoyed the session earlier. I hope you did too. It's actually very pertinent to what we're going to be talking about right now. So I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, but really this is about a community tool that I've created, and I hope you'll think that it's useful, and you'll maybe even want to use it. And also contribute to it. So it's on GitHub, as we shall see, and you can contribute ideas as well, or contribute to the development. Of course, I'd be happy to chat about opportunities there. Right. So yeah, so maybe I'll stand up a bit so you can see me better at the back. So this is really about, I think there was some talk about testing, using Azure DevOps, etc. before. But this is really about unit testing the visual layer of Power BI. So I'm pretty confident that we haven't had that before. But with the new format, we talked about the new PBIP format. This becomes a lot more possible. And this is what the PBI Inspector tool is about. So I don't know if I've coined the term VisOps for visual ops, or as in like DevOps and data ops, etc. But VisOps, right, for testing the visual layer. So why do we need VisOps? I'm hoping I can go through slides here. 1 second. Okay. So are you all Power BI developers, or would you say you use Power BI? So, I mean, this may be quite familiar to you. So, misformatting visuals is common, right? There's a whole load of formatting properties for each visual. Ideally, you'd have taken time to set up your theme file, but there's always an extra property, etc. Right? And it's not only time consuming to fix, but it's also quite boring, right? You actually want to analyze data and etc. Right? And also regression issues may cause you embarrassment, right? Or not, but what is a regression issue is, well, you fix something, right? And then you just add new charts, etc., to your report, and then you publish it, and then guess what? That old issue just recurs for some reason, right? It happens quite a lot. So how do you avoid this kind of problem? The business comes back to you, oh, that filter isn't working anymore. It's not working the same way. So how do you build tests around these? And really, if you're involved in perhaps some large data projects, you will have the experience that the data integration element of it, all the measures development, etc., just takes a lot of time, right? So, and really often the visual layer is the tip of the iceberg, right? So but actually, that tip of the iceberg is what your business users see, right? And in particular, that's what your senior leadership see in the end, right? And so they'll say, well, we've invested so many thousands or more, in this big data project, and this report is not quite up to scratch, or there's things that keep breaking from a visual layer point of view. So reports are important, and the look and feel of them is important. Okay, and so we know that if you do, if you have a dev, test, prod setup, as we talked before, perhaps with deployment pipelines, actually testing the visual layer is still a manual process, right? It's just, throw some eyeballs to the problem and just, click around, and, it feels good and looks good. That's good enough. It's going to go to production. But you can't really be expected to do that every time, right? For all your report pages, etc., and all the interactions with your across the report. Yeah. Now that's quite a big task, and I'm not supposing that PBI Inspector can resolve all these issues, but at least we can start. But furthermore, if you have a center of excellence, you may have hundreds of reports, right, that need to follow best practice around accessibility, but also performance, right, and the consistency in your reports. I think we talked about consistency where the slices are, etc., in your reports, where the logo is, ideally should be consistent from report to report or report page to report page, ideally, so that your users are familiar with what you're delivering to them. Okay. So up until now, really, we've had quite a lot of community tools. We talked about the ALM toolkit, but there's also Tableau Editor and DAX Studio, etc., which you may be familiar with. But they really focused on the tabular model, right, now called the semantic model. But I know that there's tools aside from PBI Inspector that are coming on stream now to actually test best practice around visual layer, etc., which is a great thing, of course. Okay, and I was just going to add that the new so-called Power BI developer modes, the PBIP format offers an opportunity to change this, right? Thanks to an open format, with the ability just to then create tooling on top of that. Okay, so what is PBI Inspector? So it's an open source community tool that runs customizable tests. So that's important. So there's a set of base tests or base rules that you can download and run against your reports, which I feel, talking to program manager Michael Kowalski, are quite good rules to run against any report. But really, because you may have a center of excellence, you've got your own, look and feel definitions and other things you want to do, and so you want to be able to create your own rules, ideally, right? Or customize the rules that are available as part of the, within the repository. Okay, so the tool runs on the author's, the report author's desktop for local testing. So that's quite important. So before you publish a report, at least you get a chance to just check those rules locally, right? That's I think that would be it's an easy thing to do and something to encourage. But it can also run as part of a Git pipeline, right? So we talked about Azure DevOps. And we now have the Fabric Git integration, and so it runs because there's also a command line as well as a Windows desktop interface. There's also a command line, and of course then you can run that as part of an Azure DevOps pipeline, and just pass in the parameters for each report in your workspace. For example, you can run those tests. So we'll have a look at that. So I've got quite a lot of demos, and so hopefully you get a good feel as to how that works. Okay, I've got the link to the repository here, and I think we can probably share slides afterwards, Johnny. I don't know where you are actually, but oh, there you go. Yeah. Okay. So, so what type of rules can we create, or do we want to create? I've got 3 categories here, but you can add your own. But I was thinking, rules around accessibility. I think are quite important. Maybe it's something that we don't always take time to do, but it's quite important, and a lot of organizations would have, inclusivity and accessibility guidelines. So, for example, things like make sure that you use the colors from the color palette, not your own colors, because you may not have enough color separation, right? Make sure you don't have background images to charts or background images to report pages, because actually the high contrast feature of Power BI doesn't work with that, right? And then performance, there's things you can do. We talked about performance. Don't overload the landing page, right? Don't set up too many fields on a visual, right? Because that will impact performance, of course. Just be careful about your top end filters, your advanced filters in your visuals, things like that. And then maintainability and consistency. Again, define a theme, wherever possible. I think we saw that was of great benefit. And just as we said before, just make sure that your layout is consistent, and that sort of thing. So let's just have a look at some example rules, right, to just bring it home. And later, I'll have a form later if you want just to add your own ideas, and so I can have a look. So, things like, remove visuals, custom visuals that are not used in the report. So often you try, a number of custom visuals, and they actually then become embedded in the definition of the report, but you don't use them anywhere in the report. So it's just good to clean this thing out. Reduce the usage of advanced filtering visuals. We saw that from a performance point of view. Also ensure alternative text. The alt text property has been defined for your visuals. That's quite time consuming. But some users rely on that because they use screen readers, right? And of course, the tab order is important as well. I don't have a rule for that yet, but it could be created. It's not that easy. The tab order. So when you tab on the keyboard, it just actually selects each visual in a sort of from left to right, etc. Because if your tab order is all over the place, you're tabbing from the keyboard, just from this area of the page to that area of the page and then back here. Yeah, I don't know whether you've tried that before, but that's important for accessibility because some people actually can't use a mouse, right? They have to use the keyboard. Right. Yeah. Okay. So ensure certain visual types have both axis titles. So that's like a consistency rule, right? So for your scatter chart, have both axis title displayed, yeah, and for maybe bar charts, etc. Because it's quite easy just to toggle it off and then forget about it, and you don't have a title, for example. Yeah. So also, what we can do is check for any overlap of visuals, or you can ensure a minimum margin between visuals or between certain types of visuals as well. We'll have a look at that type of rule.
Maximum.
Sorry, or maximum margin. Yes.
I want to keep that tight.
You want to keep them tight? Yeah. Do you know?
So I won't add this one in. The same.
Right.
Everywhere.
You can have the same everywhere. Yeah. Yeah. You can have that. It's just essentially in the logic, and we shall see that it's just like a less than or equal sign, okay. Or yeah. Okay, and another one I think I quite like anyway. So give visible pages meaningful names. You know how you can just in Power BI Desktop create a new page, you end up with page 1 or page 2. Then you might put one chart in there just to try things out, and then you forget about it, and you publish it, and your users end up seeing these random page names. So we can detect that as well. Yeah. Another page of these just to get into the flow of things. Check the active page. So that's in the report, ends up in the report's configuration at the top of the report.json file, which we shall look at. But the active page is the one that's, when you save the report from Power BI Desktop with a page selected, and then you publish it, that's the page that's going to be, selected upon when the users open the report, right? And it's very easy to just save the wrong page, and it's really annoying because then you have to go back and just change that. Yeah. And that goes for other local report settings. Things like cross filtering and cross highlighting, that sort of behavior. You can also check for that sort of thing, and just make sure you're consistent across your reports, right? Ensure charts use theme colors, so it's very easy to define a palette and then have somebody just choose a color, right? And we can detect that. Detect report level measure definition. So, a semantic model can have measure definition, but somebody can go and create a report level measure, yeah, which, can be a good thing. But sometimes, that's it's not really what you want them to do, right? And at least you can then flag these things and review them and suggest that maybe they use a definition already, a measure already defined in the model. Okay. Lots of other things like, beyond the custom colors, there's also lots of other properties that for which you can use a theme, right? Sometimes it's not always practical to create a theme for every single property, for every single type of chart, etc. But we get a set of rules that actually can highlight these things. You set these title font somewhere in that chart, somewhere where actually it should really use the themes font, right? Property. Okay. the cool thing about the PBI Inspector, I think, is that you can also check the custom visual properties, including Deneb chart properties. Have you ever used Deneb? Deneb is quite interesting because it actually uses its own JSON spec. JSON really is, so the Vega JSON spec to define visuals. So there's really cool visuals, but you end up with JSON within the report JSON definition, and PBI Inspector can actually go and check the properties of the, these Deneb visual as well. And this is one I just added today. Can also inspect visual calculations. Have you used visual calculations? It's brand new in preview. Yeah. Yeah. So it's quite cool. It's very, very flexible. It means that you can have essentially DAX running within the scope of a visual, right? So you define that on in the visuals. You can do cumulative sums, etc. But I think it's really good to have keep an eye on what's going on there, because you may have defined, for example, a profit measure in your model, and then you have users creating profit visual calculations all over the place. Yeah, for lots of visuals, and then you may end up with like inconsistency in the definition of that measure, etc., or calculation. Yeah. Right. So we can create all these type of rules, right? But so what are the usage patterns for PBI Inspector? So we talked about the local testing pre-publishing using the Windows app. You can also test on, create a Azure DevOps pipeline to test on pull requests, if you're familiar with those concepts. And we can also test the content of workspaces, because of course, you may already have published some reports, right? And so you want to be able to test these things on a post hoc basis, just to check whether they look okay. And finally, as a freebie, we get the ability to report on reports. So with PBI Inspector, it happens that you can actually, just extract the properties of visuals, X and Y coordinates, but many more properties, right? And just have them in a nice JSON tabular format. And of course, Power BI is great at reporting on flat JSON, shall we say, just an array of records. And so you can do that as well. Okay, so I've got a nice diagram here, so less text, right? But this is the first scenario that we talked about, and I'll follow that with a demo. So from PBI Desktop, well, I say Power BI Desktop is not the Power BI Desktop application, but well, you have the Power BI Desktop application there, but then you have PBI Inspector application, and it can test both PBIP files, right, the new format in preview, and PBIX files as well, as long as the PBIX files are not protected, because if they are encrypted, of course, PBI Inspector can't read them. Yeah, right. And then we run these rules, which are defined in JSON file, and then we get local results. So it will open a tab in your browser, and shows you the result with nice wireframes and things like that to tell you which visuals fail the test, right? So I'm going to sit down because I'll show you how that works. Okay. So let me just give you a quick overview of things. Right. So first of all, trying to think where my windows are now. Okay. So it's a bit awkward because I've got duplicating screens, but extending. So extending my screen. So let's see, I haven't thought about this properly. So this is the GitHub repo, right, for PBI Inspector. Okay, and so it's got all the the documentation, etc. And hopefully it'll make sense to you. If it doesn't make sense, let me know. Keen to get feedback, right? And there's in there there's a lot of example rules that you can use straight away, right? So in the examples, you see we got example rules, and I've got some other extra ones which you can plug in straight into the tool, just pointing to your own report, and they will run. Yeah. And let me show you what that looks like. Maybe at this stage I will I will need to duplicate my screen also. I can't see what I'm doing. Okay. Are we good? We can barely see that, but hopefully. All right. So yeah, and in the wiki, I also have anatomy of a rules file. This is how to create your own rules file. Now, admittedly, it's a little bit involved. I'm looking to streamline this and show you that. But let me explain a little bit what that looks like. So okay. So let's start with a Power BI report.json file. There's a lot of JSON in there, but if you save your report as a PBIP file, as a PBIP, right, in new formats, what will happen is that on disk it will save a load of JSON files, etc., right, locally, and one of them is the report.json file, right, and this is where you have all these JSON. These are your local settings, right, and it's quite hard to understand what's going on in here, but you'll find that things like cross highlighting versus what's the other one, cross filtering, will be defined in there somewhere. Yeah, but you also find that in here we've got sections, right, and sections are pages. Yeah, and for each page we've got visual containers. Visual containers are your charts. Yeah. And you see this nested JSON in here is the definition of the first chart in that page. So, you can go and grab that and remove all the backslashes and actually see the definition of the visual in here, right? So, not completely straightforward, but that's just the way it is currently, right? The PBI Inspector can define rules that go and explore these this JSON content. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like as an example. So what we do is it's not intended to be a tutorial here, but essentially the heart of PBI Inspector is running a so-called JSON logic, which is a logic engine that enables you to do testing against the report.json file, right? JSON logic is an open source library to define logic in JSON, express logic in JSON. So we express logic in JSON to test JSON documents, right? But I'll just explain at a very high level what that looks like. So this is a simple rules, right? Just to explain. So you see, this is my test in here. I'm just testing that 1 = 1, right? And I'm expecting true, right? And so this is what's this. So this test here will pass because 1 = 1, right? In this case, you can also just compose tests, right? So 3 is greater than 1 and 1 is less than 3, and we expect that to be true. Yeah. And then it goes on, right? But let me show you something, a proper test against a Power BI report. So in here, what we do is for each page, right? These are JSON paths, right? For each page, we test each container, right? Visual container, which is your visuals. And then this rule is kind of a useless rule, but it's just to illustrate how it works. And I'm just showing you how it works now, and then we'll look at the base rules, and you see you can run that against your own reports without having to go into this. But just wanted to give you a bit of a primer. So for each page, we check each visual, right, on the page. And in this case, we want to see whether charts are wider than tall. It's a completely useless rule, but it's just explaining how this works, right? So this is the path to that property in the JSON. Layouts.0. 0 is the desktop layout as opposed to mobile layout. That's the way it is at the moment in the report.json, right? That's what we have to deal with. But then we check the width versus the height, and then we can do a set up a greater or equal to than operator, right? And then we check that that is true. Yeah. Okay. So that's how it works. And I've got a wiki to explain how to create your own rules against that. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, he's trying to. All he does is trying to say, okay, are your charts taller than wide? Now, of course, you can have charts taller than wide. I don't mind, right? So, but I was just I thought it was a good example to show you how that's working. So, sorry.
Will you come up with a suggestion of how you can have it?
What it will do, it will then highlight the failing visual, right, okay, in a wireframe. Yeah. Okay. So let me show you now the base rules very quickly, and then we'll run a demo. Yeah. So in the base rules, what we have is we've got this type of rules. I'll just go to the title of them. Yeah. Remove unused custom visual is one of the base rules that you can run straight away. Reduce visuals on the page. Reduce the number of visuals on the page, that is. Yeah. And in this case, what you do, if you go to the test at the bottom of the test, you can see you've got a value that you can update. At the moment, I set it to 20, but it's kind of difficult to gauge what would work best for you, right? So you can set that right for yourself, this parameter here. Yeah. Reduce the number of objects within visuals. Again, this is slightly arbitrary, but we've got 6 here. That's 6 fields on a visual. Maybe more would be fine. And I've got to say, as this tool matures, we may have some more refined tests, right? That go into more granular details. Yeah. Reduce top-end filters, right? For each visual on a page. And again, we've got maximum of 4 top-end filters. Yeah. That is a maximum of 4 visuals on the page that use top-end, right? But of course you can go and change that. So this would be like performance checks, and then that would help you highlight pages that may end up causing issues, right? Okay. So and a number of other tests like this. So how do we use the tool then? Well, let me show you. So we've got this. We've got this tool in here, right, which you can download as a binary from the GitHub repo, and I've specified a report.json path for my report. It's a bit small, but I'll show you the report, what the report looks like. I can. Okay, this is my report, which I'm going to test, right? And we'll run a few different tests. And so, I've got a specific page with issues in here where, for example, this chart in here is using a color that's not defined in the theme. Yeah. And we'll do another test later to actually pick out the fact that, this one's got a drop shadow defined, where we don't actually want that because that's not part of our style, right? And yeah, and this one's got an overlap in here. Yeah, so it overlaps with this one. Of course, that's an issue, etc. Right? But let's run our base rule test first on this. So I've got, you see, when I select this, I can just use the base rule file in here that we saw, and this is included in the tool, so you don't have to browse to it. and we want the results in HTML, yeah, and we output the HTML file to the temporary files on your machine. It's fine, yeah. So I'm just going to go and run this. Okay, so in this case, you see we're opening a browser tab, and we've got a single issue, and it's the fact that this scatter chart, which used the purple bubbles, actually fails the ensure charts use theme colors rule, yeah, and yeah, and the message says, failed with results, and what it does, it just outputs the failing visual ID, which enables us then to actually map it out, highlight it in here, yeah. Okay. So, but what?
Is there a reason that didn't pick up the failure of the overlap?
Yeah, there's a reason, because that's not part of the base rules. It could be part of the base rules. Yeah. So because the overlap rule is not part of the base rules file, but I'll show you. I'll show you a file that. Hang on. There we go. I've got a lot of links in here, but let me show you. Yeah. I think this one is the one that you're after. I'll run another test with the example rules file from the repository, and that's got the rule that you're after. Okay. Okay, so in this case, it's got lots of other rules. It's got even the charts are taller than wide rule, and you can see it's picked out that one, and that's really just an example rule. There's another one here. Let me show you. There's lots of results in here. Disable drop shadows on visuals. Remember that one that had the drop shadow? That's picked out there. Give pages, visible pages, meaningful names. So we actually have a page one page in here, so that's been picked up. And then check for that's the overlap one. And actually, in the rule, you can also define a minimum margin in this case. So we've got minimum margins of 5 pixels, and you see it's picked out that they're not wide. There's like a narrow. The gap is too narrow here. Yeah, and there's a lot more because a lot of the pages replicate the same problem. These are across different pages, right? The page name is here, yeah, etc. Okay, and yeah, and this is the one here, right? So this overlap that we saw is highlighted here as well. Okay. Yeah. So now you can also output JSON instead of HTML, right? The reason for that is that you may want to report on your errors, right? So you can do that as well. And we'll see how you can then, automate that if I have time, because conscious that we're already running to time. But so let me just show you a JSON output for these tests. Okay. So it's given me a path in here. So I'm just going to paste it in the browser. Okay. Yeah. So essentially, this is exactly the same as the HTML pages we saw, but defined in JSON. So we've got the results in here. It gives us the tested file path, the rules file path, and when the test was completed. But then for each test, it gives us the rule ID, blah, 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 and whether it's passed or not. And this has failed. So that's the charts wider than tall rule has failed in this case, yeah. But it will give you all the test results in here, right, in JSON, and so you can go and create reports on that, right? And ultimately, I'm just conscious of time now. You can create, this is a bit of a toy example, but you can create reports on your tests, and you can also create reports on the visual properties in your report. So you can say, how many pie charts do I have because I want to get rid of them, right? And what other features am I using across all my reports in all my workspaces? of course, when we say tenant level, I've got to be a bit careful about what I'm saying here, because you'll be running maybe quite intensive downloads of reports and just testing each of them. So we don't have time to go into that, but you can also use the Fabric API to download reports from your workspace, right? And even PBIP format reports. There's a new Fabric API that does that. And you can, of course, use the command line interface of this tool to run the test against all those reports. So that's possible, yeah? And this is why you end up here. So let me show you, actually, because I just went a little bit too ahead of myself here, because what I wanted to show you is how to create reports on top of reports, right? So just very quickly, what you can do, I've got a special rule here. Let me show you that rule file very quickly. So this is a rule file that's a bit special because it doesn't test anything. It just outputs, let me show you. It outputs to a JSON record the name of the visual, the type of the visual, the X and Y coordinate, the width and height. So very, very simple properties, whether it's visible or not, whether the alternative text has been defined, right? And we can then go and specify that. If I grab the link to that in here, run that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to run this report rule, if you will, and I'm going to output that to JSON again. Okay, so we got it here. I'll show you what the results look like. If I go to the browser again. You see the output here is a JSON array of visual, looping through all the pages in the report and giving you each visual, name, which is its ID here, visual type, a table in this case, X and Y coordinates, whether it's visible, alternative text defined, etc. And this is quite a flat format. So contrast that with the report.json, which is very, very complicated and deeply nested with a flat table that you can easily report on. Seriously, you point Power BI to this, and you'll get a very simple one table expansion, basically, of JSON data, and you can report on that, right? Which is what I've done in the colorful report page that I showed you. Yeah, that's all it does. But of course, these fields you can, if you start putting your own rules together, you can then point to whatever property you want to extract. Yeah.
So you could fiddle with that and have just one more row which says breaks the rules, I guess.
Oh yeah, so that's interesting. So, but what you want to do, yeah, is probably you can run these report rule like that, right? And then because you've got the name, which is the unique ID of your visual, you can then also run tests, right? For all these, your base test or whatever for everything. And then you've got a nice key, right, to join on. So you'll be able to see the properties of the report, but also the test results. Yeah. And of course, what you can do is do that over time, because, getting rid of pie charts is not just an immediate thing, right? For example, if you want to do that as an example. So you want to check your progress over time. So, you want to keep storing those test results for your visuals and reports over time, and then you have a nice, line charts of progress over time as to how you're managing to bring your already published report back to your Center of Excellence guidelines, basically. Yeah. One more thing, and then that's it. I just wanted to show you that you can run PBI Inspector from the command line. Yeah. So here's an example. We point to PBI. It's called PBI Inspector, but I don't want to call it that anymore. I'm going to call it PBI Inspector. And then you pass in the file paths in there, and here right? So we've got the results here in the console output, which is not altogether useful, but at least you can see the results. You can look into the output of that and see each warning, etc., and failures for each page and each visual. But the reason I'm showing you this is because if you add the ADO as your DevOps property at the end, yeah, you get as your DevOps logging commands, right? So we got complete result failed, done, right? And that's really useful because when you build as your DevOps pipeline, you can call out to this this command line, yeah. So let me show you that very quickly, and then we're done. In here, right? So let me show you this example. So I've got a workspace connected to source control, right? My Azure DevOps Git repository. I've got one report with a one data set synced in here, as you can see, and I can see them in my repository here. Yeah. So that's the same. Okay. And then I can go and run upon pull request, right? If you're familiar with that. So your developers would create a branch, develop a branch, do the changes, and then want to commit back to the branch, but then they want the team leader to integrate that into the main branch, right? So the team leader would then run this pipeline, and they'll be able to, I'll show you how that pipeline is built if we have time, but they'll be able to see, running the rules. You see the amber ones are warnings and the red one is an error, which then actually that's quite important because an error then would stop a deployment to prod, right? Automatically, otherwise it would just get pushed to prod, right? Using the integration between Azure DevOps and deployment pipeline. So that's why this is a great tool, and I think for the first time we're then testing the visual layer, not the tabular model, right? Okay. Yeah. So we're a little bit at time, but I just want to give you a flavor as to how this is built. The great thing is that there's a tutorial online for this at learn.microsoft.com, so you can do it for yourself, right? But it's using this PowerShell script to download the PBI Inspector binaries from the repository. Yeah, so we download the client command line interface, and then we just go and loop through the checked-in files, right? Checked-in report files, and invoke the tool and passing in each file. That's how it works. And then we use these Azure DevOps logging commands to define warnings and errors, and that's how you see them. Right. That's it. Conscious that I think there's pizza or something. Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say really that if you wanted to define your own, this doesn't work very well, does it? I want to in this one here. Yeah, I mean okay. There we go. This is what I wanted to show you. So if you wanted to complete this form, this is about your own ideas for PBI Inspector rules. It's an anonymous survey, so feel free to, to leave your ideas and whether you think this was useful. Because I'm always keen to hear new ideas about what rules would be useful, so then I can build them for you and publish them to the repository. Yeah. So
we can take that, do our own custom rules. But you're just saying, yeah, let's enhance the standard library.
Yeah, that's what I want to do, right? Because you can create your own rules. At the moment, it's not. You've got a day job as well, right? And so it can be some of it. I know some people doing it. Some people are doing it, so it's possible, definitely possible. But let's try and develop a community library, right, of things that are generally useful. Yeah, or even if just examples right, that you can go and adapt, right? You change the threshold values, etc., and adapt for your own circumstances. So that's what I'd like to end up with, really. Yeah. It's in C#. Yeah. Okay. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you.